Donald Trump is a scam.
He's right, you know. The Republican Party and Donald Trump want you to suffer. They want you to work longer hours for less money with worse conditions and no benefit. They talk all the time about wanting to privatize Social Security and essentially get rid of it so that your grandma and your grandpa have to work until they die. They oppose the minimum wage. They oppose the progressive tax system that we have, that even if it was to be pumped up and we tax the mega wealthy even more, would still allow them to be very wealthy and have more money than all of us watching this video will ever see combined in our entire lives. The idea that Democrats wouldn't be on with this rhetoric, they talk about, oh, the middle class or whatever, but not as forcefully as this, because you're literally just telling the truth. You're just describing reality. It's not like you need to do anything special to point out the fact that the Republican Party wants you to work until you die and barely make enough money to live. That's what they want. And the reason why they want that is because they are completely bought and paid for by the corporate interests in this country, the mega wealthy people in this country. So apparently, as we speak, at least at time of filming, which is going to be ages before you'll see this on YouTube, the Democratic National Convention, day one, is happening. And essentially, it's a gathering of a bunch of Marxists and communists who are hell-bent on goddamn destroying the country, brother. Kamala Harris, a.k.a. Kamala Harris. Anyway, generally, I'm not going to do you the indignity of watching the entire thing like some other streamers might be doing, because frankly, I'm not going to watch it myself. That said, there are a couple good speeches at this thing, and the one that we'll be looking at today is kind of a welcome change to the broader Democratic Party zeitgeist, I guess, and a pretty good sign of the times when it comes to the broader attitude of people in the country. It's going to be the United Auto Workers president, Shawn Fain, union president, who has been very good. He's a very good speaker, very good at delivering messaging that is pro-worker, has thrown his weight around as well to help workers actually be treated with respect and dignity and bargain for better wages, and bring a little bit of democracy to the dictatorship that is a company in a capitalist system anyway. Because you all know, even if you're not too hip to the politics stuff or whatever, if you don't know, anything about literally anything, and you're just hanging out, going to work to your 9 to 5, going home, you still, because you obviously, if you are hip to any of this politics stuff, you're a fucking loser, all right? Myself included. A lot of other people, they got shit to do. They got things that need to be done. They got dependents to worry about. So you're just going to work, going home, and keeping food on the table and lights on. And it's not easy to do it because corporations want to squeeze as much money out of you from, your work and take as much of it from you as possible. So if you've gone to work, you understand just how non-democratic that system is. You go to work, you don't have a say in anything that happens there. You go there, you are at the whims of the management, who are also at the whims of the people that hired them, and the CEOs whom you will never meet, who have more money than you will ever see for multiple generations down the line, whose entire job it is to make sure that, the shareholders at the top of the company, Freudian slip, make as much money off of your back as possible. You don't have any say in what the hell's going on there. You get paid whatever you get paid. If you ask for higher wages, they kill you on the spot. It is what it is. But that's only because you are but one person, a single human being that doesn't have a lot of power in a system like that. You can't go to your boss and be like, yo, I'd like to not have to work 8,000 hours just to put food on the table. Could I make a couple extra pennies? Could we scrape a little bit of pocket lint out of the CEO's pocket and help pay for my entire rent bill? He won't even notice it. He'll take his phone out of his pocket and $1 million will fall out. He won't even notice it, and it would probably cost him more money to stop what he's doing and pick it up, so might as well. And they're gonna be like, get the fuck out of here, go back to work. And you're like, I'm on my break. And they're like, I don't give a shit, get back to work. Your break ended 5 minutes ago because you only get a 10-minute break, and you spent 5 minutes of it talking to me about some bullshit we're gonna give you more money for doing the work that literally produces the good and service that we make here. Without your work, this place would not run, because me as a manager, I'm not going to do any fucking work myself. Are you insane? Get back to work, man. And you have to take it because you have no way to bargain with them. They control every aspect of your working life, and you got nothing. You can't do anything. However, if you understand that, apes together strong, if your workers can get together and form a kind of collaborative unit that operates in the best interests of each other, some would call that a group. Some would call that a clique, maybe a clan. It's a bit of an outdated term, a guild, perhaps. In the modern day, it's called a union. And it's going to be helpful in injecting a little bit of democracy into that system that's going to help you be a more respected worker by the people that employ you. You'll make a little bit more money, you'll have better benefits. The people at the top will still make a lot of money, just not as much off of your back. And it'll be pretty poggers. And it seems like people in America, against the wishes of the Clintonite Democrats, against the wishes of Republicans since the dawn of time, it seems like people are understanding that being able to have a say in their workplace is a good thing, and it generally leads to people having a better quality of life. And unions are on an upswing. There's been a lot of propaganda pushed by right-wingers, conservatives, etc., in both parties to try to dismantle unions in this country, and for the great crime, by the way, of securing the 40-hour work week and the weekend and other such things that we all as workers take for granted now that literally needed to be fought for at times with blood, sweat, and tears. And people are understanding that, the only way we're going to get a fair shake is if we work together and force the bosses to actually give us some amount of dignity, And Shawn Fain's been really good at speaking to that as the president of the United Auto Workers Union. And it's really good, and I'm a big fan of it. Now, I talk a lot about unions on this program, if you want to call it that. This is not something that I want to be, too policy-oriented on, because that's boring as hell. All right, you can watch somebody else for that. But what I have brought up consistently is that not only do unions help the people that are working at that firm, at that job, but it can also have other downstream effects that help people that don't work there in a variety of ways. The primary one that I want to look at, and one of the big things that I always mention whenever I talk about social change and, the fight for civil rights, the fight for equality, is that as a union, there's a variety of ways that you can throw your weight around to make sure that corporations don't screw you over. Either, through the usual expectation of not getting paid enough, not getting sick leave, not being able to have a maternal or paternal leave or whatever, so that, you can go home and take care of, your partner who has just given birth to a human being and help take care of them and the child in that moment, which would lead to a better quality of life for everybody involved there. Not only can it help in instances like that, but it can also help in making sure that bosses can't discriminate against workers in other ways, like because of their religion, or because of their race, or because of their romantic or sexual orientation, You can, through that union, throw your weight around and make sure that these dumbass corporations don't give people any shit for, practicing a religion that they don't agree with, or being a certain color that they don't particularly like, or, having a husband while being a man. It's pretty cool, I think. And it helps everybody. Even the people that don't share those religions of the people who are being discriminated against, or the race of those people, or whatever else. They're not trans or whatever, but it helps them, the non-transes as well, to make sure that no discrimination can happen against trans people or any other marginalized group. Because if a company's allowed to discriminate against one group, they're sure as hell going to do what they can to use that as precedent to discriminate against you in other ways. So I think it's a good thing overall. So we'll listen to this Shawn Fain speech. It's very good. And I can get more into that afterward. But I think it's pretty cool. It's very hopeful as well.
Good evening, America, and good evening to the people that make this world move, the working class.
That's true. That's true. He's right,
On behalf of 1 million active and retired members of the UAW, I am honored to support Kamala Harris and Tim Walz to be our next president and vice president.
Pretty good. So, Democrats historically have been the party of unions. They have been able to utilize union infrastructure to get out the vote and help themselves win elections. And they do that by promising to do right by workers and by being held accountable by unions once they get elected to actually deliver on those promises. Now, they haven't always, but that's the idea. And historically speaking, they have been the party that people who are in unions and enjoy the benefits of them end up voting for, because there are elements of the Democratic Party that are actively hostile to unions, and the Republican Party is entirely hostile to unions. So, like, the least bad option there is going to be the Democrats. But they seem to have lost their way. You know, during the Bill Clinton years, after Ronald Reagan, and then with the Obama administration even, Hillary Clinton running as well and losing, and then Donald Trump being president for 4 years, unions have not been given a break for a long time. But then, a senile old walking corpse, Joe Brandon, ends up getting into office through sheer luck and is actually relatively pro-union as far as Democrats go. And not only is he, as a human being, willing to, you know, say pro-union stuff, his National Labor Relations Board, the people that aren't Joe Biden, who make sure that labor rights are not violated and all this kind of thing, has actually been really good for the worker. And the idea that Democrats would have abandoned unions during the Clinton years, etc., is absurd to me. Like, it doesn't make any sense. Because the entire point of a union is to develop an infrastructure of people who literally make the country move. You know, truck drivers, factory workers, even, you know, service workers, because we have a service economy now. The workers here are required by the nation, the country, to continue the GDP growth of the country and its economic standing in, you know, the global geopolitical realm. Without them, they're nothing. You know, because in the system that we have, and the organization of the economy and the world economy that we have, it's a pretty good thing to increase your GDP and whatnot. And, you know, the gutting of unions by Republicans has been a way to try to help corporations take advantage of you as a worker for a long ass time. And because Democrats stopped being a good electoral defensive measure against that, unions not only have declined in popularity, but they've also been less, you know, successful in that political maneuvering area. But that's changing. And for the better. It seems like whatever is happening with the Joe Brandon administration, his NLRB, and then the now Kamala Harris, Tim Walz ticket, both of which are relatively good on unions. Tim Walz, I think, is a lot better on paper, generally speaking. But, I mean, Kamala Harris is in an administration with that NLRB that's really good. And she does talk about unions being, you know, poggers as well. So the idea that you would have a union, which is an infrastructure that has thousands upon thousands of people in it, whose benefits from the unions they get primarily in the electoral sense through the Democratic Party being friendly to unions. Like, it's such an obvious point A to point B, get out the vote system. Like, all of these people in these unions who, if you're good to them, if you're giving workers respect and allowing them to work with dignity, have good benefits, have good wages, will end up being mobilized through things like the United Auto Workers Union, the UAW, to vote for you as a Democrat and help get you elected. There's all, like, you don't even have to do any work there either outside of meeting with the union and pushing for legislation that helps workers thrive in our economy. That's all you got to do. The union will take care of being like, yo, this Donald Trump fella, he fucking sucks. He wants you to work longer hours for less wages. The Republican Party wants to make it so that the retirement age for Social Security is later so that your grandma has to work longer into her twilight years until she fucking dies and isn't even going to get a lot of money for doing so and a good quality of life. That sucks. The Democrats, however, not as bad. We should probably vote for them and maybe throw our weight around when they're in power to put the pressure on them to help us solidify union labor rights and other things like that. Seems good? Seems good. Everybody's like, okay, we'll do it. And suddenly you've got thousands of people that are willing to vote for the Democrats. And they're doing all the infrastructure work themselves, detached from the Democratic Party. It's like such an easy point A to point B way to win elections. And the idea that they would not take advantage of that, and I say take advantage because it does make the Democratic Party beholden to the worker and the unions rather than the other way around. But like, it only benefits people. It stimulates the economy. You know, union jobs and union wages make wages of non-unionized firms go up as well through competition by making it so that because these union jobs are getting paid better, a lot of people are going to prefer to work there, which will make a variety of firms that don't have unions want to increase their pay rate so that they can actually get people in the door working and don't have, you know, a deficit of workers to make their money. Like, Comparable OECD nations that have huge union participation give us a lot of historical data on how this is literally better in every measurable way, this kind of system. Republicans always talk about, like, whatever country it is, Norway, Sweden, Finland, one of the Scandinavian countries that doesn't even have a minimum wage. They always talk about, oh, they don't even have a minimum wage. But you Democrats want people to have a minimum wage of $15 an hour instead of $7.25 and a slap on the ass? That's communism. Meanwhile, the only reason those countries have no minimum wage is because they don't need one. Because the unions are strong enough that they're able to force the state to protect them when they bargain for better wages when it comes to the firms they're working for. The unions are strong enough that they're able to bargain with the leadership of the firms to make sure people are paid well. So you don't even need the minimum wage in that instance. The minimum wage in our country only exists to make sure that people don't fucking get utilized for slave labor. And it's a low enough wage that wage slavery is a thing where you get paid a certain amount of money. It's not like you're not a free person technically, but you're essentially beholden to and attached to this parasitic entity that is a corporation that is feeding off of your labor, your blood, in order to make more money for their wealthy CEOs and shareholders that you'll never see. Like, the only reason the minimum wage exists is so that that isn't as bad. Because absent a minimum wage, corporations would be paying you nothing. They're already paying you nothing without unions. They'd be paying you even less. Anyway, I don't understand it. Obviously, the big reason why the Democrats don't fuck with unions, or at least didn't previously, is because they became very corporate. Unfortunately, the way our system works is that you need money to win elections because we allow for corporations and mega wealthy people to spend untold amounts of money on buying politicians so that they do their bidding. And that inherently increases the cost of running for election and hinders your chances of winning if you don't have the money to do so. So the Democrats have decided to make the devil's bargain and become more corporate. This was the Bill Clinton strategy. Become more corporate and beholden to corporate interests so that they can make that money to win those elections when, publicly funded elections might be a way to not have that be a thing or as much of a thing. And it ends up with them having to make decisions that are contradictory to the needs of the worker in order to please the corporate benefactors that gave them the money that they needed to win their elections. It's an unfortunate system, but it's the one they operate within, and they either go along to get along with it because it's the only way that they can make the money they need to win those elections, or they're actively hostile to workers. That's the reason why. Now, that doesn't have to be that way. If you have strong enough unions that are able to, threaten work stoppages maybe, and force these corporations to, follow the goddamn law and not exploit their workers and make sure people get a living wage and good quality of life and good benefits, all this kind of thing, you're not going to have to worry as much about corporate people and the people you're getting donations from being as up your ass, because, your hands are tied. It's not really up to you unless they want you to, send in the Pinkertons and kill a bunch of workers, which isn't really the best play, I don't think. Now, obviously, it's not the best solution because, the primary thing you need to do is extract the cancerous tumor that is corporate influence from our politics and move to publicly funded elections and make it so that you don't have to be mega wealthy to have a shot at winning elections. But in the meanwhile, it's a good, Band-Aid on a gangrenous wound. And it's good for the worker. So that's the reason why they've moved away, why they've lost their way. And it's good to see that they're, getting back to it. Anyway, back to the... You're here for the rambles, okay? But we also need to listen to the guy who does more than just ramble and actually does the work. So I'll shut the fuck up maybe for a couple seconds.
And I want to say thank you to Joe Biden for making history by walking the picket line with the UAW.
It's pretty good. It's pretty good.
For the UAW and for working class people everywhere, this election comes down to one question. Which side are you on?
Call me crazy, I'm on the side of the workers, all right? I'm closer to being homeless than I am to being a billionaire, and I was a worker in the service sector for 10 years, roughly. I'm on the side of the workers. It was a hard choice, but we made it. It's pretty simple.
We have Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, who have stood shoulder to shoulder with the working class. On the other side, we have Trump and Vance. Two lapdogs for the billionaire class who only serve themselves.
That's true.
So for us in the labor movement, it's real simple. Kamala Harris is one of us. She's a fighter for the working class. And Donald Trump is a scab.
He's right, The Republican Party and Donald Trump want you to suffer. They want you to work longer hours for less money, with worse conditions, and no benefits. They talk all the time about wanting to privatize Social Security and essentially get rid of it so that your grandma and your grandpa have to work until they die and can't retire with dignity. They oppose the minimum wage. They oppose the progressive tax system that we have, that even if it was to be pumped up and we taxed the mega wealthy even more, would still allow them to be very wealthy and have more money than all of us watching this video will ever see combined in our entire lives. They want you to suffer. Republicans do. It's very obvious. The idea that Democrats wouldn't be on, like, with this rhetoric, they talk about, oh, the middle class and working class or whatever, but not as forcefully as this. Because, like, you're literally just telling the truth. You're just describing reality. It's not like you need to do anything special to point out the fact that the Republican Party wants you to work until you die and barely make enough money to live. Barely make enough money to feed your children. That's what they want. And the reason why they want that is because they are completely bought and paid for by the corporate interests in this country. The mega wealthy people in this country. The Democrats, of course, are as well, but they're just not as much in the pocket because the Republican Party is, like, literally just a bunch of cock holsters for mega wealthy corporate interests. Whereas the Democratic Party, like, the mega wealthy have sprinkled a little bit of money over there, but they understand that the Democratic Party has a history of, like, having to kind of be okay to workers a little bit. And because of that, they're not as gung-ho about it when it comes to funding Democrats. And that does produce an element of weakness within that corporate party, the Democrats, that people who are pro-worker, people who are pro the dignity of the worker, the respect of the worker, and democracy in the workplace can exploit. And you're seeing it with the president of the UAW, the United Auto Workers Union, being invited to the Democratic National Convention, where they confirm the presidential candidate and vice presidential candidate to speak. Like, that's good. It's good to see. And Joe Brandon going out not knowing where the fuck he was, but at least knowing that he was among union folks, and he's okay with that, you know? And walking with them at the picket line. That's good stuff. It's symbolic, but it's good. It helps give a lot more legitimacy and respect to unions, and helps more and more people be like, oh yeah, maybe I would not want to work until I die, and maybe unions could actually help with that, because they historically have, and in every comparable OECD nation they have as well, and it's produced better quality of life for literally everybody, and also better workers for the firms, and the CEOs also benefit from that as well, so it's literally better for them too, but they get to make less money, so they don't like it. You know? It's good stuff. Oh, by the way, I see a lot of people be like, what the hell is a scab? I always hear people talk about scabs, and, like, I understand it's somebody who crosses a picket line, but what's up with that? Why is it called that? My understanding is it's that scabs don't picket, meaning scabs don't join picket lines and instead cross them to go to work and be traitors to their fellow worker and decide not to, you know, collaborate with the rest of the workers who are trying to bargain for better wages and better working conditions. That comes from scabs don't picket, meaning don't pick your scabs. If you have a scab on your skin, you probably shouldn't pick it because it's, you know, part of the healing process or whatever. So scabs don't pick it. It's a play on words. Anyway.
That's not just my opinion, that's a fact. All we have to do is look at the track record. When Donald Trump was president, corporate America ran wild. Donald Trump did not bring back the auto industry. When Donald Trump was president, auto plants closed. Trump did nothing. Trump told workers in Lordstown, Ohio,
He did, you know.
That he would be bringing all the auto jobs back. And
That's what he
Trump
said.
did nothing. In 2019, General Motor workers went on strike for 40 days for good jobs and a better life. And Trump did nothing. Talk is cheap. But in 2019, you know who was on the picket line standing shoulder to shoulder with auto workers?
Joseph Robinette Brandon.
I'll give you a clue. Her initials are Kamala Harris.
They're KH. Well, that's okay.
In
He's got the spirit.
2023, who helped bring jobs back to Lordstown, Ohio? Kamala Harris. And in 2024, who will stand with the working class in our fight for justice? Kamala
Conure Harris. Sorry.
Harris. And that's the difference. Donald Trump is
Conure
all
law?
talk, and Kamala Harris walks the walk. Woo. In the words of the great American poet, Nellie, it's getting hot in here.
I have no clothes to take off, or otherwise I would join him. I'm just wearing a t-shirt. I'll take my house shoes off. There you go. Scandalous.
It's hot in here because you're fired up and you're fed up, and the American working class is fired up and fed up. The American working class is in a fight for our lives. And if
This is the lib version of Hulk Hogan ripping his clothes off. Don't disrespect one of the strongest fighters for workers' rights in this country by comparing him to that racist piece of shit that, you know, Macho Man Randy Savage should have finished the job on, frankly. R.I.P. He didn't get to live long enough to, you know, complete the task. Fuck Hulk Hogan.
Just last night, blue-collar workers, the UAW members
Oh,
at Cornell University had to walk out on strike for a better life because they're fighting corporate greed. And our only hope is to attack corporate greed head-on. Corporate greed turns blue-collar blood, sweat, and tears into Wall Street stock buybacks and CEO jackpots.
It's true. Stockholders, shareholders, CEOs, they're parasites. When he says blue-collar blood, workers' blood, that's what they do. They suck your blood, they exploit your labor, they force you to break your body just to make them a couple extra dollars and see the upward trend continue to rise. It's not worth it. Not worth it. I would not call them vampires, because frankly, vampires are hot, generally speaking. And these CEOs do not deserve that kind of a compliment. They're parasites. You know, they're like a stomach worm that eats the food that you ingest before your body has a chance to digest it, you know? They're like that fungal parasite that takes control of insects and pilots them like mechs. But instead of an insect, it's you. Not good.
It causes inflation. It hurts workers. It hurts consumers. And it hurts America.
It is true. Unions have not been linked, and the increasing wages of workers has not been linked to the rise of prices for the consumer. Generally speaking, that's just a fear-mongering tactic from corporations to be anti-worker. Oh, if we give people an extra couple dollars an hour, then the cost of the burger will go up. So first of all, the CEOs have control over how much these things are going to cost. Or the people, the managers in that firm have control over that. It's usually going to be influenced by the rest of the industry that they're competing with as well, but often they can collude to keep prices higher. But essentially, a lot of times, they'll just raise the prices because of the fact that, like, the commonly held ignorant refrain from making sure workers have better benefits and are treated with respect is that the price for the consumer will go up. But that doesn't really make sense when you consider that the consumer is also often the worker. And if those workers get a higher wage, they'll have more money with which to spend. And the amount of money that they're gaining is not going to be less than the amount that anything would go up in terms of price. So like, even if it was the case that prices went up, it would not be in any registerable way because the people that are consuming the shit are also the workers whose wages are being raised. And frankly, even if they were operating at a deficit, they could just like skim a couple $1 billion off of their end of the year CEO bonuses and, you know, help pay for the continued running of these companies instead with that money. Instead of, you know, letting them hoard it like a dragon and sleep on the pile and do nothing with it, you know? We call that price leadership, which is somehow different than price collusion. Yep. Also, the product that you're getting as consumer, if people actually have, you know, good working conditions, et cetera, will be better as a result. You know, who do you think is going to produce a better burger for you? Somebody that hates their job, is barely getting paid enough to live, is literally only there for the bag, and it's a fucking tiny bag at that, and is cutting as many corners as is possible in order to make their job easier because of the absurd hoops and hurdles they have to jump through to please management, or somebody who enjoys working there, gets paid well, therefore has a better quality of life, likely isn't overworked, has better benefits, and isn't cutting corners because they don't have that kind of animosity to the job that they're doing because like they're getting paid well for what they're doing. And frankly, they might even enjoy it, but that is dependent on the firm. Who do you think is going to produce a better burger? It's probably going to be the people that are not hating themselves and their lives for being there, I think, you know? And not only that, but unions help guarantee better and safer working conditions for workers, and also better regulations when it comes to the product that's getting served to consumers. If ever it is the case that, you're getting an inferior product, it's almost entirely the corporation's fault because they're the ones in power there, and not the workers who are getting paid $2 an hour to produce it. They don't have any control over how the things are running. They don't order the ingredients that they're using. They don't control the regulations and the way that things are supposed to move. They're just a cog in a machine. So, like, if the shit sucks, you blame the people that control the workers, not the workers themselves. Anyway.
Corporate greed is alive and well in the auto industry. Last fall, we achieved life-changing gains in our strike at the Big Three.
Life-changing gains.
We even won a commitment to reopen a closed plant not too far from here. We were able to do that thanks to the support of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and the thousands of auto workers that went on strike.
It's a fair amount of glazing, by the way, but for one, some of it is deserved because the Brandon administration and his NLRB have been pretty good to workers, but also it's a way to kind of attach yourself as a union to the candidacy of the politician, and should the politician win, should send a message to that politician that you might not have been able to make this happen and attain this power without us. So don't fuck us over or we could ruin your life. We can make it harder for you to win re-election. We can make it harder for you to get anything done. There's a lot of power that goes into being in a democratic arrangement as a worker because of how much your labor is required for the country to move and work.
But a year later, one company wants to go back on their commitments in our contract. And let me be clear, Stellantis must keep the promises they made to America in our union contract. And the UAW will take whatever action necessary at Stellantis or any other corporation to stand up and hold corporate America accountable.
Hell yeah.
And when the UAW stands up, we know who stands with us and who stands against us. Donald Trump laughs about firing workers who go on strike.
It's true. When he had that conversation on Twitter Spaces with Elon Musk that started an hour late because Twitter is a shithole website. It already was, but it's worse now under Elon. He literally was like, yo, Elon, I love how, when there's people striking at your company, you're like, haha, fuck you, and you fire them, which is, against labor rights and labor law. And they both laughed about it. They literally hate you. They quite literally hate you. That's why corporations want to use automation as much as possible. In theory, automation should be used to make it so that people don't have to work certain jobs, and instead, they have more time to do shit they actually want to do, which would be a variety of jobs that can't be automated, and also just general leisure activities or art or other things like that enrich society. And people should be getting even UBI conversations come in when things like that happen. But instead, automation should serve to benefit the worker. But instead, companies want to replace the worker with machines and automation, not as a way to make the life of the worker easier, but to replace them because you don't have to pay a machine. You only have to pay to maintain it. You only have to pay the power bill. One of the first things corporations will look at when it comes to their overall expenditures, the money that they spend, and whenever they think that they're not making enough money for the CEOs and the shareholders, the first thing that they'll look at is not operation costs related to the business-to-business things that they're buying in order to fulfill the good and service that they're doing or whatever. It's not CEO pay being astronomical and giving them way too much goddamn money that they're not even doing anything useful with. The first thing that they're going to look at is labor costs. Labor costs, i.e. your paycheck. The first thing that they're going to look for is how much fat can we trim off of labor costs in order to make more money for people who already have more money than God, who are literally just parasites that suck the blood of the worker in order to make more money that, they're speculating on bullshit with, or dumping into Bitcoin or whatever. That's the first thing they'll look at. How many people can we fire and still keep things moving? Because having less people employed means less people you have to pay a wage to. How much money can we cut the wages of the workers that are still there? And how much of that money could we then give to, CEOs and whatnot? That's the first thing they're going to look at. Because they fucking hate you. And they have the power to do it because it's literally a dictatorship. The workers have no say in it, even though the only reason those companies exist is because of the worker. Unions are there to help protect you. So whenever automation rolls around, they're going to use it to not have to pay workers, human beings, a wage, and they can cut labor costs that way. And they don't give a fuck what happens to the people that were previously employed because they don't need you anymore. The only reason that you're paid a wage at all is because they don't have the capacity to have all these goods and services be produced without you. So once it gets to the point that they can replace you with robots and whatnot, they will without a second thought. And the only way that you're going to be able to stop them from doing that is through the power of a union, is through the power of the legislature and the law, if there are politicians that are in power that are able to push through legislation that protects the rights of human beings. And you could theoretically replace all labor that is replaceable with automation and do right by the workers that would have been there by, giving people money through a UBI type system. And it is often the case under places that do have a UBI, a universal basic income, that people end up still going out and trying to find work anyway because they want something to do to fulfill themselves. They want a reason to live and give back to their community and help the people around them because that's how humans are. So automation could be fucking cool. We could have luxury, gay space, fully automated communism, but it's going to require getting the fucking parasites out of the way, which are the CEOs, the shareholders, all these people that lord over you like kings.
Trump is pushing divide and conquer tactics of the rich. It's the oldest trick in the book. They want to blame the frustrations of working class people. They want to take those frustrations, they want to blame it on race. They want to blame it on LGBTQ plus people. They want to blame it on some destitute and desperate person at the border.
It's good rhetoric.
They do that
it's true.
Because they want working class people to be divided and to focus and keep the focus off the one true enemy, corporate greed.
It's true. And that is what the fuck we're talking about. So obviously, if you're watching this channel, you've heard me talk about this before and say similar things. Some people are saying that Shawn Fain got this rhetorical strategy from watching my channel. I can neither confirm nor deny. That said, that is quite literally what corporations have been doing. They fund a variety of politicians, usually Republican, to push these bigoted propaganda pieces out there to make people fight amongst themselves, make the workers fight amongst themselves, so that they can, skim more money off the top of your labor. That's why they do it. It's a pretty effective strategy, as it would turn out. And it's not good. Generally speaking, if somebody in a position of power who has more power than you is telling you that your problems come from somebody who is lower on the economic rung than you, you're getting taken for a fool. They think you're fucking stupid. And they're trying to, throw a smoke bomb on, the fact that they're literally the problem. And there's a lot of examples of this happening. The big thing about this for me, and why I like seeing this, and why it does give me hope for the future, which the supply of is very low and the demand of is very high in the current economy, is because of that fact. Unions are pretty good at helping people be less bigoted. And I'll explain that. I always talk about how, in the same way that intersectionality is the way that you should view your political activism, your feminism, etc., the idea that there is an intersection of different identities that you might have, being class, race, religious identity, gender, sexual or romantic orientation, all those kinds of things. There's a variety of different, pieces of those that all of us can take and put into our identity. And they're all, more or less, if you're in a marginalized position, under attack by corporate interests and the politicians that support them in order to stop you from looking at the boot that's on your neck from the corporations. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of people who are bigoted in general and just hateful because they're hateful. But when it comes to mega wealthy people, it's more likely that they're doing it for the divide and conquer reason, like Shawn Fain was describing here. And not only should your activism then be intersectional in that way, you should fight for the rights of people whose identities you don't share, because you probably share some amount of identity with them in other ways. That is also how bigots and corporations who want to keep workers divided attack you in an intersectional capacity. They make sure that they can pick you apart in the different identities you have. Be like, oh, if you're a white guy, it's because of, black and brown people that your wages are not going up, because they're taking your jobs. Oh, are you a straight guy? Well, it's because of those queers that you're not being able to make enough money to keep food on the plates of your children. And they even do this, between marginalized identity. You're like, oh, are you a Hispanic? Are you a Latiner? Well, it's because of those black people that you're not getting a fair shake in this country, brother. You gotta worry about them. And because of that, it becomes really difficult to keep people united and fighting against a common enemy, which is the corporate interests that are responsible for all of these problems and the politicians that are puppeted by them. And there's a variety of different CEOs and mega wealthy people out there that are in that position to be able to do that. You have Jeff Bezos, you have Mark Zuckerberg, you've got people like Donald Trump, you've got a whole bunch, the Koch brothers, you've got the people that run the Heritage Foundation, Leonard Leo, you've got the Federalist Society, the broader Republican Party and the GOP, and all of the wealthy people that donate to those politicians. It's all stripes. Funnily enough, it's a variety of different identities there that are linked in their shared identity of being in the owner class, being the people that employ people, that have the dictatorship, the authoritarian control over a variety of workers who they exploit the labor of. They may not agree on everything. So they might have different religious views, they might have different ethnicities, they might have different identities in whatever way, but what links them all together is that common class identity that they have with each other. And in that same way, what'll link a variety of people, black, white, brown, religious minorities, gay people, straight people, whatever, what they might not have in common when it comes to those different identities, they will have in common when it comes to their class position, which would be the worker. Or even people that are small business owners, that are there's a lot of small business owners out there that are pieces of shit. There's also a lot of small business owners out there that are genuinely good people that are just trying to make a living and try to do as well as they can for the people that work for them, But generally speaking, they're in a kind of different position. It's a whole different conversation. The majority of the people are workers. And why I think this is really important is because especially cisgender, heterosexual, white people, specifically men, but a lot of cis white women fall into these problems as well, even though they have their own problems to deal with when it comes to misogyny. They often have a lot of difficulty empathizing with people of other identities that are struggling for whatever reason. It's hard for a white person to understand what it's like to be black in America, because they just don't live that life. They haven't grown up in the same areas. They aren't as familiar with a variety of cultural aspects of being a black person in America and a lot of the negative effects because of bigotry in our society. They don't have that experience, so it's hard for them to understand it. Now, you can try to learn more about it through art, through study, through having friends who happen to be of those identities that you don't share. But that's not as easy, especially if there's a lot of pressures on you as the white person in this instance, the straight person in this instance, who there's a lot of pressures trying to push you to look down on those people so that you don't look up at the corporate greed that's actually the root of your problems. What I like a lot about unions and worker democracy is that it helps cut through that veil, that wool over your eyes that is the bigotry that's being propagandized to you. It's going to be hard for Joe White Boy to understand what it's like to be Latino in America, to be an immigrant from another country and struggle to, make enough money to live and also make some money to send back to your family in whatever country it is that through a roll of the dice you were born in. But through a shared understanding of being a worker of that class position, you could be like, oh, wait, I, as Joe White man, understand what it's like to be poor. I understand what it's like to not know where the next bill payment is going to come from. I know what it's like to decide what bill I should pay and what bill I can go without because I don't have enough money to make sure that everything is in a good position here. Because I need to make money also to pay, or to be able to pay for food, to feed my family and keep the lights on and blah, 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 blah. I understand what it's like to have a shitty boss that doesn't pay me enough, that treats me like a piece of shit anytime I ask for better wages on my own. I understand what it's like to be in that position, and it turns out that other people, black, brown people, queer people, women even, should they exist, they also have to deal with that. And you can empathize with that. And I think that's a good introductory way to help build an amount of empathy for people that have so many pressures against them from bigots that are trying to divide people and societal pressures to be like, wait, maybe, you know, we could work together here. And it's not going to just be that helps people stop being racist or whatever, but it's a good intro. You know, it's a good way to get somebody's foot in the door, and then there's a whole bunch of other work that person has to do, and, you know, hopefully loved ones of that person that tries to help them unlearn a lot of their bigoted views, etc., to keep going on that path, but at least they got started through the understanding that that trans person that's being fear-mongered about is literally working at Starbucks and Target to try to keep the lights on. Like, you're familiar with that kind of struggle, maybe we're not so different, you know? It's a good way to build up the muscle that is empathy for your fellow human being that you can then, you know, parlay into trying to help people just become better people and want equality for all. And then refocus their ire on the corporate interests that have forced this brain disease of bigotry into them through propaganda. It's very good at doing that. And there's a lot of examples of it. You might have a racist uncle who is a hypocrite in the way that they talk about race issues because they have a black friend at work who they can relate to because they work the same goddamn job. But he's like, oh, he's not like he's like one of the good ones, you know? Like, there's a lot of people out there that are irrational in that way because bigotry is inherently irrational. It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's all made up. It's bullshit. If you can use that shared connection that they have and try to undo a lot of that damage and try to make them, you know, not be racist anymore through that, unions can help a little bit because you end up having to work together and fight for the benefit of yourself. You can be selfish about it. And it also happens to benefit other people that are struggling alongside you in that union. And not only that, but you can also threaten work stoppages and other kind of ways to, you know, stop corporations from being bigoted in that way. Say, you know, you're in a union. Let's say you've got a black trans woman who was fired, and you have a suspicion that it's not because she was a bad worker. She was one of the best workers that you had and was a delight to be around. But she was fired, and you have no knowledge as to why. Like, and it turns out that you think that it might have been, you know, racially motivated or motivated based on her gender identity or whatever. You can actually fight to get that person rehired. This has actually happened in society, maybe not in that exact precise example, but workers banding together to stop a wrongful firing and get it reversed and get that person back into the fold has actually happened. And if you're able to band together as workers and be like, yo, we'll shut the shit down and we'll stop you from being able to make money. If you keep like not hiring a bunch of people just because of, you know, their racial identity or their religious identity or whatever, that can go a long way to, you know, undoing a lot of this bigotry that's in our system. It's not the perfect solution, but it's one that you can have as a worker an active direct impact on. Because you're not a politician, you're not holding the levers of power, you're not drafting and putting forward legislation and voting on it, you're just working. And so you're not in a position to like undo a lot of the structural problems that continue the inequality in our system when it comes to racial and religious and ethnic and, you know, gender-based lines, but you're in a position to help people that are immediately around you, the people that you work with. And I think that's very beneficial. And it's a good way to like give yourself hope for the future. It's a good way to make you feel like you're part of a broader community and not alienated and alone. It's a good way to even make friends and make connections that you might not have had before when you go to a union meeting or whatever. It's all gravy, brother. It's good stuff. If it's run well, and you want these unions to be run well. I find that to be a really hopeful way to think about unions when it comes to social issues, when it comes to the fight for civil rights and equality for all people, which as a humanist, as a decent human being, as a normal person, you should want. It's pretty good stuff. I don't know. I think it's cool. So the idea that the Democrats, like their hand is being forced and they're having to capitulate to the interests of unions and workers is a really hopeful sign for the future. And it's good for them too. Like, it's literally like a get out the vote effort for them. And they don't have to do anything other than do right by the workers in the form of legislation and protections for workers when they get into political power, which is literally their job already.
Are you ready to stand up, speak up, and show up and put Kamala Harris and Tim Walz in the White House?
Yeah, sure. We need it. It is preferable to the alternative. And if you're in a union, Like, another common refrain that people that are skeptical about the Democratic Party because they've been burned before, who are on the left, ostensibly, is that, oh, well, you know, Democrats have been shit to workers for a long time, shit to further left people for a long time. Why should I give a fuck about who's in the White House? Because they're all shit anyway. For one, you know, that kind of black and white thinking is not necessarily true. And for two, even if it is, you can utilize unions to force Democrats to actually do right by people. For instance, say that the Democrat is in the White House, and I don't know, there's a certain nation state that is committing a genocide against another population. And you don't like that because you're a normal human being. You're not a big fan of genocide. What power do you really have to affect any change to that? You're not in political office. You're not in the administration. You can't just call up Joe Brandon and be like, yo, stop this shit, man. It's not good. However, if the Democrats understand that one of the reasons why they were able to get that power to begin with, and one of the reasons why they might be able to get reelected in the future, is because of the fact that unions supported them, well, I mean, there's a lot of organized people here that helped you get elected. We kind of have a little bit of power now to throw our weight around and maybe, you know, stop working for a little bit and making money for the wealthy benefactors and put a bit of pressure on the Democrats through that to not be genocidal freaks. Sounds good to me. That is something that you can do. It's not just when it comes to, you know, workers' rights that unions can be beneficial. It can also help affect political change outside of that. You can threaten to, in an organized capacity, because as a worker, you understand you should have a lot of empathy for the struggle of a variety of oppressed peoples, not to mention people that are currently undergoing a genocide at the hand of the far-right Netanyahu government in Israel, the Palestinians. You understand that that's not good and that shouldn't happen. And the fact that the Joe Brandon administration has not been very good on that front and has been actively evil to the Palestinian people, if the Democrats understand that the unions can, you know, shut shit down and are organized enough to be able to do so and then make your administration look bad because of it, they might be a little bit more willing to capitulate to your demands and, you know, be decent human beings and stop funding the nation state that is currently slaughtering children. Would be cool. I don't know. And you could do that for a variety of other issues as well. You could do that, like when climate change, as in implying that it hasn't already, when climate change comes knocking on people's doors in ways that they can not avoid and look away from, depending on where you live anyway, and the corporations are in a primary position of power because they are at the top of a lot of these industries that are contributing to the continued degradation of our climate and the worsening conditions of our environment that are already affecting people the world over, but will eventually affect your Angloid ass at some point too. You know, if you're living in the north, you might be able to not only put pressure on the corporations if you work in those industries and, you know, the energy sector, to make them make better choices and stop trying to put profit over the continued existence of the human species, as well as the Democrats and the politicians in power to, you know, put forward environmental protections and even invest in research into green energy technologies and maybe, I don't know, stop being such fucking dumbasses when it comes to nuclear power, become a little bit better on the climate because of that, because it's going to affect workers too. Your life as a worker is going to be negatively impacted first by the negative downstream effects of climate change before it's going to affect the CEOs and, you know, the corporations and even the elected representatives in the government. It's going to affect you first because you have less resources to avoid it. You don't have enough money to buy land in New Zealand and build a bunker and wait for the impending climate apocalypse. You're going to be on the chopping block. So you need to be able to get the powers that be to actually do something to protect everybody. Not just yourself, your friends, your family, your loved ones, etc. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of ways that you can utilize union infrastructure to literally make people's lives better and fight against the enemy that is trying to make it worse, which is CEOs, multinational corporations, the politicians that are paid by them to do their bidding, etc., etc.
Defender of the working class in the White House, someone who is one of us and someone who knows how to fight. And that fighter is the next president of the United States, Kamala Harris. Thank you.
Good stuff. I think AOC comes on.
New York representative.
Yeah, AOC comes on here as well. I highly recommend you go watch that because it was a pretty electrifying speech. We're not going to watch it here because this has already gone on long enough for this segment. But yeah, It's one of the big things that gives me some hope in, this dark, cruel world. Like the increase in popularity in unions, in not only, the workers generally speaking and people unionizing, but also the fact that Joe Brandon's NLRB has been pretty good for the worker and for unions. And Tim Walz has been very good for the worker in Minnesota. Kamala Harris in the Brandon administration has as well when it comes to the NLRB and whatnot. It's pretty good stuff. Also, the industries that are involved in our infrastructure, like the building of roads and the construction of houses and whatnot, those are very important industries as well. And I mean, should they be unionized, you might be able to actually fight through work stoppages and other things like that. Better infrastructure, maybe investment into like light rail or high-speed trains or walkable cities or protected bike lanes or any of these other ways, the building of more public housing and affordable housing. A variety of things can be fought for through union infrastructure, and it's pretty cool. I don't know. I think it's neat. Anyway, have fun out there. Be good. Fight for your fellow worker. And, yeah. Vibe out.